She needed one evening. That was the deal. One dinner, one performance. And then we would go back to being the two people who split the last of the conference room coffee and never talked about it. I told myself that was fine. I had gotten good at fine. What I did not expect was her father. My name is Daniel Hurst. I was 34, a project coordinator for a mid-size architectural firm in Portland, Oregon, and I had spent the better part of 2 years learning that being the man who shows up reliably does not mean people will notice when you stop showing up at all. I was not angry about that. I was just tired of being surprised by it. The job fit the man, I suppose. Architecture is mostly about making invisible things hold weight. The steel inside the walls, the tolerances in the joints, the decisions nobody sees once the drywall goes up. I was good at that. I was less good at making myself visible in rooms that were not looking for me. I was like a man who had spent years learning to build the frame of things for other people and had not quite gotten around to building anything for himself. My last relationship had ended quietly, the way most of the important things in my life ended. Not with any particular explosion, but with a slow, mutual agreement that the architecture between us had never really worked. Her name was Priya, and she was not a villain, and I was not a victim. We were just two people who had been holding up a structure that neither of us had ever actually believed in, and eventually the weight of pretending got heavier than the weight of letting go. She moved to Seattle, I bought a sourdough starter and told myself the project was about patience. 3 weeks later I threw it away and acknowledged that I am not a patient man. Before Priya, there had been 2 years in Boston that I did not talk about. Not because they were painful in any dramatic sense, but because they were the kind of years that teach you something so quietly and so thoroughly that by the time you understand the lesson, you have already organized your life around it. The lesson was something like this. Being easy to rely on does not make you easy to love. Those are two different things, and the world will let you confuse them for a very long time before it corrects you. I had come out of Boston without bitterness, I want to be clear about that, but with a very specific and measured idea of what I was willing to believe about myself in relation to other people. I was useful, I was steady, I showed up. What I did not do, for a long time after Boston, was step forward. Volunteering yourself into a situation you don't have to be in requires a certain confidence in your own welcome, and that was the one thing I had spent 2 years quietly setting down and not picking back up. I had been at the firm for 4 years. Nora Callahan had been at the firm for 2. We sat across a narrow hallway from each other, which meant I had spent 22 months hearing her laugh before I had ever properly heard her explain why. She had shoulder-length auburn hair that she kept in a low ponytail on deadline days, and wore loose on Fridays. She had a habit of reading printed documents the way other people read letters, carefully, with full attention, like the paper might tell her something different if she looked long enough. She was 31, she ran half marathons on weekends that she did not talk about unless you asked, and she had a quality of stillness in difficult meetings that I had spent a considerable amount of time trying to understand and failing, like a person who had decided early that attention was more useful than performance, and had been quietly right about that her whole life. She was not quiet, she was still. There is a difference. Quiet is the absence of something. Still is a choice. She came to my desk on a Thursday at 4:47 in the afternoon, which I noted because I had a 5 o'clock call and was already stacking up my notes. I need to ask you something weird, she said. My whole calendar is weird things, I said. Pull up a chair. She did not pull up a chair. She stood, which told me the ask was either very small or very large, and people stand for both because sitting feels like a commitment to either outcome. My family has a dinner Sunday. My parents, my aunt and uncle, a couple of cousins. She crossed her arms, not defensively, just like she was holding the sentence in. My mother she's been putting pressure on me about someone I ended things with 6 months ago. His name is Marcus. He's going to be there. That sounds like a lot, I said. It is a lot. The thing is, if I show up alone, my mother is going to spend the entire dinner making the case for why I should give him another chance. And I can't. She stopped. I'm not doing that. I'm not giving him another chance. I waited. I need someone to come with me, she said. It's not a real date. I just need someone physically present at that table who can act like he belongs there and who Marcus will find mildly threatening. I considered that. Mildly threatening, I said. You're tall, she said. You have a very steady way of looking at people that reads as either calm or ominous depending on whether they're guilty of something. That might be the most specific compliment I've ever received. She smiled. Just barely. So, will you? I should have said something practical. I should have asked about logistics, parking, whether there was a script. Instead I said, what time? The dinner was in Lake Oswego at her parents' house, a colonial-style place set back from the street with a lawn that had been recently aerated, and a wraparound porch with 2 empty Adirondack chairs that looked like they had not been sat in since spring. The kind of house where a lot of love had happened over a long time and the furniture was starting to know it. Nora had briefed me in the car. Her father, Robert, was a retired civil engineer who collected vintage maps and did not ask questions he already knew the answer to. Her mother, Patricia, was warm in the aggressive way that meant she had an opinion about everything and would share it regardless of whether the conversation had reached that natural moment. Her cousin Diane was the one to watch, sharp, funny, and loyal to whatever position Nora's mother held, which made her an unpredictable variable. And Marcus. Marcus was 36, owned a landscaping company, and had, according to Nora, a talent for making you feel like the most important person in the room, right up until the moment he needed to make someone else feel that way instead. And your father? I asked. She looked out the windshield for a moment. My dad he's good. He's the kind of person who watches more than he talks, and by the time he says something, he's usually already decided how he feels about you. Should I be worried? Only if you're not who you say you are, she said. She was not looking at me when she said it. But something about it landed with more weight than she probably intended. The front door opened before we reached the porch. Her mother was already talking. Patricia Callahan was a small woman with large energy and the specific gift of making a question sound like a welcome, while still being very much a question. She pulled Nora into a hug, evaluated me over Nora's shoulder with professional speed, and said, "And you must be Daniel. Nora said you work together." "We do," I said. "She makes better decisions than I do, and I try to learn from that." Her mother laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one. I filed that away. Robert Callahan was in the kitchen, standing over a cast-iron pan with the quiet confidence of a man who had cooked this meal many times before and did not need to announce it. He was tall, probably 6'2" in his prime, with silver hair cut close and hands that belonged to someone who had spent decades drawing precise things. He shook my hand, said my name once, and went back to the pan. Like a man who had spent 50 years deciding in the first 30 seconds of meeting someone whether they were worth the full sentence, and had no particular obligation to pretend otherwise. I liked him immediately. That was the problem. Marcus was already at the table when we came in. He was handsome in the way that you notice and then feel slightly manipulated by, the kind of face that is arranged to seem effortlessly good-looking, which always made me think about how much effort had gone into the effortlessness. He stood when Nora entered the room. He did not look at me. Like a man who had decided before he arrived that I was not worth the energy it would take to be threatened by me. That told me everything about what kind of man he was. The dinner moved the way those dinners always move, slowly, with a lot of serving and passing and the performance of a family trying to be themselves while also being observed. Her Uncle Richard was loud in a friendly way, the kind of man who fills silences not because he is nervous but because he genuinely believes the room will enjoy whatever is about to come out of his mouth, and about 60% of the time he is right. Diane sat across from me and watched me with the kind of quiet assessment that reminded me of Nora, which made sense because apparently it was a family skill. Diane asked where Nora and I had met. I said the firm. She asked how long. I said a couple of years. 2 years is a long time to work with someone, she said, and looked at Nora when she said it, not at me. Marcus asked what I did, and I described the coordination work, and he nodded the nod of a man who has already categorized you and found the category manageable. Nora sat beside me. She was steady, not relaxed. I could feel the particular stillness that had gone from a quality into an effort, but steady. She laughed at her uncle's story about a camping trip with the wrong tent. She asked her father about the pan, whether it was the Dutch oven or the skillet. She was doing the thing she did at difficult meetings, which was hold the temperature of a room in her hands and make sure nothing got too hot. I caught her eye once during the appetizers. She gave me a look that said, "You're doing fine." I was not doing fine, actually. I was doing something considerably more complicated than fine, which was realizing that I did not want to be pretending. That was the thought I set down carefully on the table next to my wine glass and decided to examine later, when the evening was not currently happening. At the 30-minute mark, Marcus said something to Nora about a hiking trail they had gone to, not asking her if she remembered, stating that she did, the way people state things they want to use as evidence. She answered pleasantly and briefly. He said something else, and she answered that too, and I watched his expression shift very slightly. The kind of shift that belongs to a man who is not getting the return he expected on his investment. He turned to me then. "So how long have you two been together?" The table went a little quieter. Nora's hand was on the table between us. I covered it with mine. Not dramatically, just placed it there. "Long enough," I said. That got a look from Diane that I could not fully decode. It got a small sound from her mother that was either approval or surprise. And it got nothing at all from Robert Callahan, who continued eating with the composure of a man who was listening to every word in the room and choosing not to acknowledge any of them yet. I excused myself briefly after the main course. When I came back, Marcus was saying something to Nora in a lowered voice, not whispering, but quieted in the way of something meant only for the two of them. She was listening with her face very still, not the good kind of still, the kind that costs something. He stopped when I sat down. He smiled at me. It was a very deliberate smile, the kind a man produces when he wants you to know he is being civilized and would like credit for it. I picked up my fork. I did not look at him. What I wanted to say was several things I was not going to say. What I did instead was put my hand back on the table beside Nora's, and this time I did not cover it. I just set mine down next to hers, and she moved hers slightly, and our fingers overlapped, and that was all. It was not dramatic. It was just true. Marcus looked at the table. Then he looked away. Cruel people are easier to understand when they know what they are. Dessert was a lemon cake that Patricia had made herself, and by the time it arrived, the dinner had found its rhythm again. Marcus was quieter. The conversation moved toward her uncle's plan to retire in Bend, toward Diane's job at a hospital in Sacramento, toward her father's latest map acquisition, a 19th century survey of the Pacific coastline that he had found at an estate sale in Astoria. "I'll show you later if you're interested," he said, looking at me. Not at the table. At me. "I'd like that," I said. He nodded. Went back to his cake. Nora pressed her knee briefly against mine under the table. I was not sure she knew she'd done it. By then I already knew that whatever I had told myself about this evening was not going to hold. You can build a structure on a false premise, and it will hold long enough to look like something solid, but eventually the load gets distributed wrong, and the thing shows you what it was always made of. I was sitting in her parents' dining room pretending to be something I apparently very much wanted to actually be, and the architecture of that was starting to stress. After dinner, while the kitchen was being cleared and Marcus had stepped out to take a call, Robert Callahan said, "Daniel, come look at the maps." It was not a question. His study was a room that had been thought about. Bookshelves on 3 walls, organized not alphabetically but by some internal system I would have needed to ask about. A reading lamp with a green shade that had been there long enough to belong. Framed maps in between the shelves, survey maps, nautical charts, the kind of topographic drawings that remind you geography was once something people had to go out and physically discover. He unrolled the Astoria map on his desk with the care of someone handling something he respected. I leaned in. The detail was extraordinary. Every inlet, every rise and fall of the coastline, drawn by hand with the kind of patience that has mostly gone out of the world. "That's remarkable," I said. I was not performing. I meant it. He looked at the map for a moment. Then he looked at me. "My daughter is careful," he said. I waited. "She has good reasons to be careful." He was still looking at the map, but the sentence was entirely about me. The last person she brought to this table was not careful with her. Something in my chest tightened. "I know I'm not supposed to say that," he said. "I know it's not my business in the way that a father wants to make it his business. Nora is 31 years old, and she has made good decisions her whole life, and she doesn't need me to manage hers." He rolled the edge of the map slightly, just enough to keep the curl. "But I watched her at that table tonight." He stopped. I did not fill the silence. "I watched her," he said, "and she was not performing." He finally looked up. His eyes were steady and direct, the kind of eyes that had been drawing precise things for 40 years and had gotten very good at seeing what was actually there. Whatever you two called this, whatever story you told yourselves coming in, I'm not interested in that story. I'm interested in what I saw. I stood very still. She looked like herself, he said. She looked like the version of herself she is when she's not managing anything. He looked back at the map. I haven't seen that at this table in a while. There it was. I stood in that room with a 19th century map of a coastline between us, and I could not say a single dishonest thing. I don't know what we are, I said. I want to be honest with you about that. The arrangement tonight was not what we told your wife. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. I know. But the part that wasn't pretend, I stopped, started again. That part was real. I don't know what to do with that yet. He looked at me for a long moment. Yes, you do, he said. He rolled the map back up with the same care he had unrolled it with. He handed it to me briefly, let me feel the weight of it, took it back and set it against the wall. I'm going to go check on the coffee, he said. Take your time. He walked out and left me standing in the room. I found Nora in the hallway outside the kitchen, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed and her shoes off, which I had learned meant she was done performing for the evening. Marcus had apparently said his goodbyes. I had not noticed him leave. "How are the maps?" she asked. "Extraordinary," I said. She looked at me. Something in my face must have read differently than the last 2 hours, because she uncrossed her arms. "What did he say to you?" she asked. "He said you looked like yourself tonight." She was quiet for a moment. "He said that?" "He said he hasn't seen that at that table in a while." She looked at the floor, then back up. "Daniel. I know tonight was supposed to be one evening," I said. "I know that was the deal. I'm not—" I stopped, trying to be precise. "This was not a moment for vague things. I don't want to make this into something uncomfortable between us. You needed a favor and I was glad to do it. If that's where it ends, I'll go back to being the guy across the hallway and we'll split the conference room coffee, and that's fine." I paused. "But I want you to know that the part that wasn't pretend was a lot of it, in case you want to know that." She looked at me for a long time. The kind of look she gave printed documents, careful, like she was reading something that might tell her something different if she looked long enough. "The hand thing," she said finally. "The hand thing. That was not part of any briefing." "No," I said. "It was not." She looked at the wall for a moment. Then she looked back at me. "I have a half marathon next Saturday," she said. "I don't talk about them, but if someone asked me to get coffee after, I would probably not say no. Not because it was a declaration, because it was the most honest thing she had said all evening that wasn't directed at someone else." "What time?" I said. She smiled. "This time not barely. That was 8 months ago. We had the coffee. She finished the half marathon in 1 hour 48, which I am told is good. And she told me this without telling me this by simply not mentioning her time until I asked. Then we had dinner, a real one, at a small place in the Pearl District with mismatched chairs and a window seat that made people accidentally honest. I told her what her father had said in the study, all of it, because I had decided I was going to be someone who told her true things, and that decision needed a starting point. She was quiet for a long moment. "He really said that?" "He said you looked like yourself." She looked out the window at the street, then back at me. "He's not easy to impress." I got that. "He doesn't say things like that." "I know." She picked up her coffee, set it back down without drinking it. "What did you say to him when he said it?" "I told him I didn't know what we were," I said, "and that the parts that weren't pretend were a lot of it." She looked at me the way she looked at printed documents. Carefully, long enough. "Okay," she said, not dismissively. Like a decision had been made and she was acknowledging it. Then we had a lot of ordinary evenings, cooking dinner in her apartment with music she had very specific opinions about, driving out to the coast on weekends, sitting in compatible silence in a way I had not managed with anyone in a long time. She liked to read on Sunday mornings with the window open. I liked to make coffee badly and let her correct me. We found a rhythm. Not a loud one, the quiet kind that holds. We told the firm after 3 months. Our manager said she had been waiting for us to figure it out. Apparently we were the last to know. Robert Callahan sent me a text 2 weeks after the dinner. It was a photograph of a different map. Hand-drawn Pacific coastline, different era. Just the photo. No caption. I texted back, "That's extraordinary." He texted back, "Yes." That was it. That was the whole conversation. I understood it completely. 3 months ago, Nora and I drove back to Lake Oswego for a Sunday dinner that did not require any performance from either of us. Her mother made the lemon cake again. Her father asked about a project I was working on at the firm and actually wanted to know the answer. Afterward, he showed me 3 more maps. I stayed until her mother told us it was late and handed us leftovers in a container that was the kind of container families only use when they expect you back. In the car on the way home, Nora said, "He likes you." "I like him," I said. "He doesn't like a lot of people." I noticed. She was quiet for a minute. Then, "Thank you for being honest with him. That night, I don't know exactly what you said, but..." She stopped. "He told me afterward that you were the first person I'd brought home who told him the truth about something." I thought about that, not because it felt like a compliment, because it felt like a starting point. Because the structure between us had been built on something honest from the beginning, even when we were calling it a favor, even when neither of us had the right word for it yet. And structures built on honesty hold longer than the ones that look good from the outside and were never really holding anything at all. She had a half marathon in the spring. I signed up for the 10K, which she thought was hilarious. I finished. She finished 14 minutes ahead of me and was waiting at the end with coffee, which is the best thing anyone has ever done for me, and I have told her that, and she acted like it was nothing, which is the second best thing. I am still not a patient man, but I am learning that patience and attention are not the same thing, and attention, the kind her father has, the kind she has, the quiet noticing of what is actually there, that I can do, that I have always been able to do. I just needed someone who would notice that I was doing it. Have you ever been asked to pretend to be something and realize somewhere in the middle of it that you weren't pretending anymore? And has someone ever seen you clearly in a room that expected you to be something else entirely? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one landed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.